Two gunmen have been shot after they opened fire in a shopping mall. Philippine authorities have now confirmed that the toll in yesterday's hotel bombing has risen to 146 dead, 231 wounded. It is the most devastating terrorist attack in Asia in the last 10 years and the worst Manila. While no organisation has taken responsibility for the attack, Western intelligence has found chemical traces that are hallmarks of the infamous arm dealer, Amir Barkawi. International security experts say the Barkawi family is now investigating violence in remote capitals to foster instability and thus fuel massive arms sales around the globe.
Before a single bullet is fired, London has already become a stage of mourning. Church bells ring, black cars glide through rain-soaked streets, and thousands of people gather to honor a dead prime minister. It feels solemn and dignified. Yet beneath this ceremony lies something invisible. Thousands of security personnel, armored vehicles, encrypted communication systems, intelligence analysts, and diplomatic arrangements are all moving simultaneously like gears inside a giant machine. In this quiet beginning, London has fallen immediately reminds us that modern civilization depends on systems that work silently until disaster suddenly exposes them. The film arrives with an intriguing premise. What happens if the most protected gathering on Earth becomes the perfect target? What if nearly every powerful leader of the Western world is gathered in one city and somebody decides to attack all of them at once? This simple question is the foundation of the entire story. It is easy to understand, emotionally immediate, and commercially attractive. Good action films often begin with a concept that can be explained in one sentence, and this movie possesses exactly that quality. On the surface, this is an action thriller about Secret Service agent Mike Banning protecting President Benjamin Asher during a coordinated terrorist assault on London. But from an industry perspective, it is something much larger. This film is a carefully engineered entertainment product designed to deliver suspense, scale, destruction, and heroism while remaining financially manageable. It transforms global anxiety into cinematic spectacle and converts fear into an emotional roller coaster. The movie was produced with an estimated budget of approximately $60 million. By modern blockbuster standards, that figure is surprisingly restrained. Many superhero films spend well above $200 million. Here, The filmmakers had to create the illusion of worldwide catastrophe with less than one-third of that spending power. Every explosion, every destroyed landmark, every military sequence, and every elaborate action set piece had to be planned with financial discipline. That financial limitation becomes one of the movie's most interesting aspects. Cinema is often perceived purely as art, but filmmaking is fundamentally resource allocation. Every helicopter shot has a price. Every location closure has a price. Every visual effect artist, every camera operator, every stunt coordinator, and every hour of post-production editing represents capital being transformed into emotion. The audience may experience only excitement, but behind every frame lies an accounting exercise. The producers were also accepting substantial investor risk. The previous film in the franchise, Olympus Has Fallen, had succeeded commercially, earning over $170 million worldwide. Yet sequels are never guaranteed victories. Audiences can lose interest. Action franchises can become repetitive. The marketplace can shift unexpectedly. Therefore, London Has Fallen was essentially a $60 million wager that viewers still wanted to see Mike Banning save the world one more time. The technological ambition of the film is equally fascinating. London itself is one of the most recognizable cities on Earth. Destroying its landmarks on screen required a delicate blend of practical filmmaking and digital effects. The movie had to make audiences believe that famous locations were collapsing into chaos without actually harming anything in reality. This required visual effects pipelines, computer-generated environments, digital compositing, and carefully coordinated editing. In many ways, action cinema resembles engineering. Engineers ask how to construct systems capable of performing under stress. Action filmmakers ask how to construct emotional experiences capable of keeping audiences engaged for 100 minutes. Both disciplines depend on planning, precision, testing, and execution. One builds bridges. The other builds tension. The story also arrives during an era in which audiences had become increasingly interested in narratives involving security threats and geopolitical crises. Modern viewers live in an interconnected world where events occurring thousands of miles away can instantly affect global psychology. The film uses this collective awareness and transforms it into entertainment. The fear is recognizable, but the response is cinematic. One extraordinarily capable individual steps forward and restores order. Mike Banning himself functions almost like a corporate brand. He represents reliability. He is the person who continues moving when systems fail. In business language, he is a high-performance asset. Audiences know that whenever chaos erupts, Banning will endure punishment, improvise solutions, and continue fighting. That predictability becomes part of the franchise's value proposition. President Benjamin Asher provides another interesting dimension. He is not merely a political leader. Within the narrative, he becomes a symbol of continuity and institutional stability. Protecting him means preserving confidence in systems themselves. The film, therefore, transforms a physical rescue mission into an emotional defense of order against chaos. The movie's opening atmosphere deliberately slows itself before accelerating. This is excellent narrative economics. Effective stories invest time in establishing normal conditions because destruction means more when something valuable exists beforehand. The funeral ceremony creates dignity, international cooperation, and a sense of historical weight. When violence eventually erupts, the emotional impact becomes significantly greater. Ultimately, London Has Fallen should be viewed as a fusion of art, engineering, and capital. Artists designed emotional experiences. Engineers and technicians built believable destruction. Investors supplied millions of dollars hoping audiences would reward the gamble. What appears to be a straightforward action thriller is actually a sophisticated collaboration involving psychology, finance, logistics, technology, and storytelling. Before the first major attack occurs, the movie has already accomplished something remarkable. It has taken a single frightening question, wrapped it in ceremony and spectacle, and transformed it into a high-concept entertainment enterprise. The stage is prepared. The world's leaders are assembled. The security machine appears invincible. And somewhere in the shadows, an invisible hand is preparing to test whether the strongest systems on Earth can survive coordinated chaos. The funeral of the British Prime Minister creates an atmosphere of order and dignity. Heads of state from around the world arrive in London under extraordinary security arrangements. From a storytelling perspective, this opening functions exactly like a company preparing for a major product launch. Months of planning, enormous resources, and countless stakeholders are involved. The audience instinctively assumes that such preparation guarantees safety. The film deliberately encourages this confidence because the eventual collapse of security will feel even more shocking. President Benjamin Asher arrives alongside Secret Service agent Mike Banning. Unlike many action heroes, Banning's introduction is surprisingly ordinary. He is tired, concerned about his pregnant wife, and looking forward to taking a less dangerous assignment. This detail is important because stories need emotional investment before they need explosions. Audiences care more deeply about characters who possess personal lives and private hopes. By giving Banning something meaningful outside his profession, the screenplay increases the emotional stakes. This approach resembles startup development. Investors rarely place money into products alone. They invest in founders and human stories. Similarly, viewers are not yet investing in action scenes. They're investing in people. The movie is quietly establishing emotional equity before asking audiences to endure prolonged danger and destruction. The pacing during these early moments is remarkably efficient. Every conversation serves multiple purposes simultaneously. Security teams discuss protocols while also revealing relationships. Political dialogue communicates diplomatic realities while creating anticipation. Banning's interactions with President Asher demonstrate mutual trust and familiarity. Good screenwriting behaves like efficient engineering. Every component performs more than one function. The film also highlights the enormous complexity involved in protecting world leaders. Motorcades, intelligence briefings, road closures, surveillance systems, emergency contingencies, and military personnel all operate together like interconnected departments inside a multinational corporation. The audience is shown an impressive machine. Yet there is an underlying tension because viewers understand that systems, regardless of how sophisticated they appear, can still fail. Then the attacks begin. The transition is sudden and violent. Explosions erupt across London. Buildings collapse. Gunfire echoes through streets that moments earlier appeared peaceful. The film wastes very little time once the crisis starts because action cinema depends upon rhythm. Delaying the catastrophe would reduce urgency. Triggering it quickly converts anticipation into immediate engagement. From a business perspective, this sequence is the movie's equivalent of unveiling its flagship product. Everything that preceded it served as research and development. Now the audience experiences the central promise of the film. Can one man survive an impossible attack while protecting the President of the United States? The destruction itself is carefully designed. Terrorist attacks strike multiple locations simultaneously, creating the impression that every layer of security has failed. This is psychologically effective because people are naturally disturbed by coordinated crises. Human beings derive comfort from predictability and control. By removing both almost instantly, the film produces anxiety and excitement in equal measure. One of the cleverest aspects of this first half is its use of scale. London suddenly feels enormous and dangerous. Streets become mazes. Landmarks become targets. Every corner could conceal another attack. This transformation creates the sensation that the protagonists are isolated despite being surrounded by thousands of people. The city itself almost becomes another character. Mike Banning's response reveals why audiences enjoy competent heroes. He processes information quickly, adapts to changing conditions, and immediately prioritizes the president's safety. In economics, uncertainty often destroys confidence because people feel powerless. Banning represents the opposite principle. He behaves decisively under pressure. Watching competence emerge during chaos is deeply satisfying because it temporarily restores our sense of order. President Asher also becomes more interesting during these moments. Instead of behaving purely as a symbolic figure, he increasingly functions as a partner in survival. He trusts Banning's judgment and follows instructions despite the confusion surrounding them. Their relationship resembles an executive and an experienced operations manager. One represents institutional leadership, while the other provides practical execution. The attacks additionally create enormous narrative leverage. Every explosion increases emotional investment because the stakes continue rising. The audience understands that failure no longer means political embarrassment. Failure could alter international relations and potentially destabilize entire governments. By connecting personal survival with global consequences, the screenplay increases its perceived importance. Notice how efficiently information is delivered. The terrorists are not immediately overexplained. Their complete strategy is not revealed at once. Instead, the movie provides information gradually. This resembles product prototyping in business. New features are introduced step by step so consumers remain curious and engaged. Narrative mysteries function similarly. Every unanswered question becomes another reason to continue watching. The film's first half therefore operates like a carefully managed investment portfolio. Early scenes build emotional assets. Relationships create value. Security preparations generate confidence. Then the screenplay deliberately destroys those assets, producing uncertainty and suspense. Every sequence contributes to a larger objective, convincing audiences that circumstances have become almost impossible. By the end of this section, London has transformed from a ceremonial gathering place into a battlefield. Systems have collapsed. Communication is fragmented. World leaders are dead or missing. The president is being hunted. And Mike Banning, who only wanted to return home to his wife and future child, finds himself once again carrying responsibilities that seem far larger than any one individual should bear. The second half of the film begins with London feeling less like a city and more like the aftermath of an earthquake. Smoke hangs in the air, emergency sirens echo in every direction, and information becomes scarce. In crises, one of the first casualties is certainty. Nobody fully understands who is alive, where the next attack will happen, or how deeply the enemy has infiltrated the system. The movie deliberately creates this informational vacuum because uncertainty is one of the most powerful generators of suspense. At this stage, the story becomes remarkably simple. President Asher must survive, and Mike Banning must get him to safety. Simplicity is often underestimated in storytelling. Businesses sometimes fail because products become overly complicated. Successful products usually solve one problem extremely well. Likewise, the film strips away unnecessary objectives and focuses on a single urgent mission: protect the president. This narrative simplicity dramatically improves emotional engagement. Audiences no longer need to process political complexities or international relationships. They understand exactly what success looks like and exactly what failure means. Every decision, every gunfight, and every movement through the city now contributes directly toward one understandable objective. The screenplay also begins converting earlier investments into rewards. Earlier scenes established trust between Banning and President Asher. Now that trust pays dividends. The president listens to instructions, follows directions, and relies upon Banning's judgment without hesitation. The relationship feels believable because it was carefully built beforehand. Good storytelling resembles compound interest. Small emotional deposits made earlier eventually produce large emotional returns. Mike Banning's effectiveness becomes even more impressive during this section. He continuously adapts to changing conditions. Routes become blocked. Allies disappear. Plans fail. Yet he remains operational. In organizational psychology, resilience refers to the ability to maintain function despite adversity. Banning embodies resilience in its purest form. Every obstacle simply becomes another problem requiring a solution. The terrorists, meanwhile, demonstrate another important principle. Their strength does not come from superior numbers or technology alone. It comes from preparation and coordination. They have studied security patterns, anticipated responses, and synchronized their attacks with extraordinary precision. In many ways, they resemble highly organized competitors entering a market after extensive research. Their strategy depends upon exploiting weaknesses that others overlooked. The film uses this imbalance to generate tension. Viewers understand that conventional systems have been overwhelmed. Military resources exist, but cannot immediately solve the problem. Intelligence agencies are active but struggling. Communication networks remain disrupted. Consequently, audiences become increasingly dependent on the actions of one individual. The more institutions fail, the more valuable the hero becomes. One particularly effective aspect of the second half is its management of physical exhaustion. Banning absorbs punishment throughout the film. He runs, fights, climbs, and survives explosions while receiving little rest. This exhaustion matters psychologically because invulnerable heroes can become emotionally distant. By allowing him to become tired and injured, the film preserves his humanity. President Asher also changes during these events. Earlier, he appeared primarily as a leader being protected. Now, he increasingly becomes a participant in survival. He witnesses destruction directly and experiences fear personally. Shared danger creates human connection. The relationship between president and protector gradually evolves into something resembling friendship. The story's emotional product-market fit becomes especially clear here. Audiences generally enjoy narratives in which competence, loyalty, and courage triumph against overwhelming odds. London Has Fallen consistently delivers those elements. The film understands exactly what emotional experience its audience purchased. They came seeking suspense, heroism, and cathartic victory. The screenplay continually supplies those expectations. The pursuit eventually leads toward the discovery that the attacks are part of a larger operation centered around revenge and public execution. The terrorists want more than assassination. They seek spectacle. They understand that images possess enormous psychological power. Killing a world leader privately would be significant. Broadcasting the event globally would become something entirely different. Fear spreads much faster when accompanied by images. This introduces another fascinating idea. Modern conflict increasingly occurs inside information systems. Perception can be almost as important as physical destruction. The villains therefore attempt to convert violence into communication. They want the world to witness helplessness and humiliation. Their intended audience is not merely the president. It is everyone watching. The climax builds by continuously narrowing available options. Every route becomes more dangerous. Every safe place appears temporary. The pressure keeps increasing until audiences feel that escape is almost impossible. This is highly effective pacing design. Strong narratives often resemble tightening springs. Each complication adds more tension until eventual release becomes deeply satisfying. Eventually, the film reaches its emotional payoff. Banning's competence, loyalty, and refusal to surrender begin generating results. Systems that appeared permanently broken gradually recover. Reinforcements arrive. Opportunities emerge. Hope slowly returns. Importantly, victory never feels effortless. It feels earned because audiences have witnessed the cost of every step. From a product perspective, the film succeeds because its emotional promises align with its delivery. The audience was promised danger, relentless suspense, and a hero capable of navigating impossible circumstances. The second half converts those promises into satisfaction. This is precisely what businesses call product-market fit. Expectations are established early and fulfilled effectively. By the conclusion of the narrative, London itself feels transformed. The city that initially represented ceremony and international unity has endured devastation and fear. Yet the story ultimately argues that institutions can recover, relationships can endure extraordinary pressure, and determined individuals can still influence enormous events. The explosions and gunfire provide excitement, but the deeper reward comes from witnessing order slowly emerge from chaos. Action films often succeed because explosions and chases are visible manifestations of invisible human struggles. Beneath the gunfire and collapsing buildings, London Has Fallen is ultimately a story about pressure. It examines what happens when individuals are forced to make decisions while carrying enormous responsibilities. The physical conflict may occur in the streets of London, but the psychological conflict occurs inside the minds of its characters. Mike Banning is particularly interesting because he lives in a constant state of divided priorities. Professionally, he is responsible for protecting the President of the United States. Personally, he is preparing to become a father and wants a quieter life. These two desires are not naturally compatible. One demands permanent vigilance and danger. The other requires presence, stability, and peace. In behavioral economics, this is called an opportunity cost. Every choice automatically sacrifices another possibility. Banning's profession has conditioned him to prioritize duty above comfort. Throughout the film, he repeatedly ignores his own safety to protect someone else. Such behavior may appear extraordinary, but psychologists often observe similar patterns among soldiers, emergency responders, and security personnel. High-responsibility professions gradually transform risk into routine. Actions that appear terrifying to ordinary people become normalized. Yet the film wisely avoids portraying him as an emotionless machine. He worries about his wife and unborn child. He experiences exhaustion and frustration. He understands the possibility that he may never return home. These emotions make him believable because resilience does not mean the absence of fear. It means continuing to function despite fear. Leadership pressure is another central psychological theme. President Benjamin Asher carries a different burden. His decisions potentially affect millions of people. Leaders often exist in situations where uncertainty is unavoidable, information is incomplete, and consequences are enormous. Behavioral economists sometimes call this decision-making under ambiguity. Human beings generally prefer clear outcomes and predictable environments, yet leadership frequently demands action despite uncertainty. During the attacks, President Asher loses many of the advantages associated with office and status. Titles suddenly become less important than survival. Motorcades disappear. Communications fail. Protective systems collapse. This process is psychologically revealing because crises often strip away social roles and expose fundamental human characteristics. We begin seeing individuals not as institutions but as people. The relationship between Asher and Banning gradually becomes one of the movie's strongest psychological components. Trust develops through repeated demonstrations of competence and loyalty. Trust itself is a fascinating economic concept because it reduces uncertainty. Societies function because individuals trust systems, contracts, and other people. In the film, trust allows decisions to occur rapidly. The president follows instructions because questioning every decision would increase danger. This relationship resembles high-performing organizations. Effective teams frequently emerge not from friendship alone, but from reliability. Every successful company contains individuals who consistently perform under pressure. Their predictability creates confidence. Mike Banning essentially becomes the human embodiment of reliability. The terrorists also provide an interesting study in behavioral psychology. Their actions are driven primarily by revenge and symbolic punishment. Human beings possess a strong desire for fairness and reciprocity. When people believe they have suffered injustice, they may become willing to accept enormous risks in pursuit of retaliation. Revenge frequently feels emotionally satisfying because it creates an illusion of restored balance. Yet revenge carries its own economic irrationality. It often demands tremendous costs while producing limited benefits. The antagonists dedicate extraordinary resources, planning, and manpower to execute their operation. They are highly organized and disciplined, yet all this energy is devoted toward destruction rather than creation. Their actions demonstrate how powerful emotions can redirect intelligence towards self-defeating objectives. Another fascinating psychological element involves fear itself. Fear narrows attention. It encourages short-term thinking and immediate survival behavior. Throughout the attacks, many characters experience informational overload. Explosions, uncertainty, and conflicting reports create cognitive stress. Under such conditions, human beings frequently make poor decisions. The film continuously contrasts ordinary reactions to fear with Banning's unusual ability to remain focused. This difference can be partly explained through experience. Expertise often changes how people perceive threats. Novices see chaos. Experts identify patterns. Experienced surgeons can operate during emergencies that overwhelm others. Firefighters can enter burning structures while remaining functional. Banning processes danger differently because his mind has been conditioned through repeated exposure. The movie also explores trauma responses. Traumatic situations typically generate three broad reactions: fight, flight, or freeze. Throughout the film, various individuals display each response. Some attempt resistance, some seek escape, and others become temporarily paralyzed by fear. By showing these different reactions, the story feels psychologically authentic despite its exaggerated action. There is also an underlying examination of identity. Mike Banning repeatedly claims he wants a normal life, yet his actions reveal that protecting others has become central to his sense of self. Behavioral psychologists often observe that people derive meaning from roles requiring sacrifice and competence. Identity is not merely what individuals say about themselves. It is revealed by the choices they repeatedly make. The opportunity cost of conscience appears repeatedly. Banning chooses danger over comfort. The president chooses responsibility over self-preservation. Security personnel risk their lives for leaders they may know only professionally. Every act of courage demands sacrifice. Economists frequently discuss costs in monetary terms, but some of life's most significant costs are measured in time, comfort, and safety. Ultimately, London Has Fallen presents a simple yet powerful psychological argument. Systems can fail, information can disappear, and circumstances can become terrifyingly unpredictable. Yet human beings still retain agency. Character is often revealed when familiar structures collapse. Under extraordinary pressure, some people become consumed by fear, some by revenge, and some by responsibility. The film's emotional strength comes from observing these competing psychological forces collide in the middle of catastrophe and discovering that courage is not the absence of vulnerability, but the decision to keep moving despite it. Action films are frequently discussed in terms of explosions, stunts, and heroic moments, yet beneath all of those visible elements lies a complicated financial operation. London Has Fallen was not simply a movie. It was a $60 million commercial experiment. Investors, producers, distributors, and creative teams collectively accepted substantial financial risk in the hope that audiences around the world would exchange money and attention for approximately 100 minutes of suspense and excitement. By modern blockbuster standards, an estimated production budget of $60 million is surprisingly disciplined. Many contemporary franchises routinely spend more than $200 million before marketing costs are even considered. This film therefore occupied an interesting position in the market. It wanted to deliver global destruction and blockbuster spectacle while maintaining financial restraint. In business language, this resembles a company attempting to create a premium product with carefully controlled manufacturing costs. Production budgets themselves are often misunderstood. Audiences imagine that money is spent only on actors and explosions. In reality, filmmaking resembles the operation of a temporary multinational corporation. Salaries must be paid to actors, directors, producers, cinematographers, editors, assistant directors, makeup artists, stunt performers, transportation teams, security personnel, visual effects artists, and hundreds of other specialists. Equipment must be rented. Locations must be secured. Insurance policies must be purchased. Accommodation, catering, permits, and logistics all require capital. London Has Fallen faced an additional challenge because its central premise demanded scale. The movie portrays coordinated attacks on one of the world's most recognizable cities. Creating this illusion required visual effects pipelines, practical destruction sequences, extensive location work, and highly coordinated action choreography. Every minute of chaos on screen represented months of planning and millions of dollars in expenditures. Action filmmaking can therefore be viewed as controlled spending in pursuit of emotional intensity. Producers ask an unusual question. How many dollars are required to generate one additional unit of audience excitement? Every explosion becomes an investment decision. Every helicopter sequence becomes a capital allocation exercise. The objective is not destruction itself. The objective is emotional return. Marketing then introduces another layer of financial complexity. Production budgets are only part of the equation. Large films frequently require marketing expenditures that approach or even exceed half of production costs. Television advertisements, digital campaigns, international premieres, trailers, billboards, media appearances, and promotional partnerships all consume enormous resources. Although exact figures vary, industry estimates often suggest that global marketing campaigns for films of this scale can easily add tens of millions of dollars in additional spending. Consequently, the total financial commitment associated with London has likely exceeded its production budget by a considerable margin. Investors therefore required significant worldwide revenue simply to achieve profitability. This leads us to break-even economics. Movie theaters generally retain a substantial percentage of ticket sales, meaning studios do not keep every dollar generated at the box office. Consequently, films often need to earn roughly 2 to 2.5 times their production budget to approach genuine profitability after distribution and marketing costs are considered. London has reportedly earned approximately $205.8 million worldwide. Relative to its $60 million production budget, this represents around 3.4 times the initial investment. From a financial perspective, this performance was impressive. The movie not only recovered its production expenditures, but also generated sufficient revenue to justify the continuation of the franchise. In many industries, investors seek evidence of scalability. They ask whether one successful product can become a repeatable business model. Franchises answer this question beautifully. Audiences who enjoyed Olympus has represented an existing customer base. London Has Fallen did not need to introduce Mike Banning from the beginning because consumers already understood the brand. Sequels therefore possess important economic advantages. Brand awareness reduces customer acquisition costs. Marketing becomes more efficient because audiences already recognize familiar characters and narrative formulas. The movie effectively leveraged existing goodwill while introducing a new location and larger scale of destruction. The casting choices themselves also carried financial implications. Gerard Butler had already established himself as a recognizable action performer with international appeal. Morgan Freeman brought credibility and prestige. Aaron Eckhart returned as President Asher, reinforcing continuity. Familiar faces reduce uncertainty because audiences feel they understand the product they are purchasing. Distribution strategy was equally significant. The film received an extensive international release because action cinema often performs exceptionally well across language barriers. Explosions, suspense, physical danger, and heroism communicate effectively regardless of cultural differences. This universality expands the available market considerably. International box office revenue has become increasingly important to Hollywood economics. Modern blockbusters are rarely designed solely for domestic audiences. Instead, studios construct films capable of appealing simultaneously to North America, Europe, Asia, Latin America, and numerous emerging markets. London Has Fallen's emphasis on global stakes and recognizable landmarks made it particularly suitable for international distribution. Revenue streams also extend far beyond theaters. Streaming rights, digital purchases, television licensing agreements, airline entertainment packages, and physical media sales all contribute additional income. Successful films increasingly function like intellectual property ecosystems rather than isolated products. Merchandising opportunities in this franchise may not rival those of superhero properties, yet brand value still exists. Recognition generates future viewing, increases library value, and creates opportunities for sequels. In business terminology, intellectual property compounds over time. The film can almost be described poetically as a $60 million experiment in organized fear. Millions of dollars were invested to create a temporary emotional experience in which audiences could safely encounter chaos, danger, and uncertainty while knowing that heroism and order would eventually prevail. Financial success also validated the producers' original thesis. They believed audiences still desired grounded action thrillers centered around competence, loyalty, and high-stakes rescue missions. The worldwide box office suggested that this assumption was largely correct. Consumers rewarded the product because it delivered an experience they valued. Perhaps the most fascinating lesson from London Has Fallen is that cinema constantly transforms intangible emotions into measurable economics. Fear becomes ticket sales. Suspense becomes streaming revenue. Heroism becomes intellectual property value. What audiences experience as entertainment is simultaneously an elaborate system of capital deployment, risk management, global marketing, and return on investment analysis. In the end, the movie stands not only as an action thriller but also as a successful commercial enterprise. Investors accepted substantial risk, filmmakers transformed resources into spectacle, and audiences around the world converted emotional engagement into revenue. Every collapsing building, every chase sequence, and every act of heroism was also a financial decision, proving once again that modern cinema is where art, capital, and human psychology continuously intersect. Action movies often appear effortless when viewed from a theater seat. Cars explode, landmarks collapse, helicopters circle overhead, and heroes move through chaos with remarkable confidence. Yet every second of cinematic destruction represents hundreds of technological decisions. London Has Fallen may tell a story about terrorism and survival, but beneath its narrative lies an impressive demonstration of modern filmmaking engineering. The filmmakers faced an immediate challenge. London is one of the world's most recognizable cities. Millions of people know its streets, landmarks, bridges, and monuments. Therefore, the movie could not rely on vague backdrops or generic locations. Audiences needed to believe that coordinated attacks were occurring in the real London. Achieving this illusion demanded sophisticated integration between practical filmmaking and digital technology. Modern cinema frequently functions like simulation engineering. Engineers use software to model aircraft, bridges, and climate systems before building them physically. Filmmakers do something similar. They use digital tools to construct environments, predict visual outcomes, and create experiences that cannot exist safely in reality. The destruction shown in the film was therefore not random spectacle. It was carefully engineered simulation. Action filmmaking also depends heavily upon pre-visualization, commonly called previs. Before cameras begin recording, artists often create digital versions of scenes using computer-generated environments and animated camera movements. Directors can experiment with angles, pacing, and action choreography long before actors arrive on set. This process saves both time and money because mistakes discovered digitally are dramatically cheaper than mistakes discovered during production. The movie's numerous attack sequences likely required extensive previs planning. Coordinated explosions, collapsing structures, moving vehicles, and dozens of performers must operate together with extraordinary precision. One miscalculation can increase costs significantly or create safety concerns. Pre-visualization, therefore, becomes both an artistic tool and a financial management strategy. Cameras themselves represent another fascinating layer of filmmaking technology. Modern action productions frequently employ high-resolution digital cinema cameras capable of capturing extraordinary levels of detail and dynamic range. Camera systems from manufacturers such as ARRI and RED have become industry standards because they allow filmmakers to preserve visual information even under challenging lighting conditions. Dynamic range is particularly important in action movies. Scenes often contain bright explosions alongside dark environments. Human eyes can perceive enormous differences between shadows and highlights. Cameras traditionally struggled to reproduce this complexity. Modern digital sensors have dramatically improved this capability, allowing filmmakers to preserve detail in both bright flames and dim environments simultaneously. Lens choices also influence psychology more than audiences realize. Wide lenses can make environments feel expansive and overwhelming. Longer lenses compress space and increase tension by making objects appear closer together. London Has Fallen frequently alternates between these visual approaches. Some sequences emphasize the scale of destruction, while others intensify claustrophobia by making danger feel uncomfortably near. The film also relied extensively upon practical effects. Practical effects involve physical elements created during production rather than exclusively inside computers. Explosions, debris, smoke effects, squibs, damaged vehicles, and environmental destruction often produce more convincing results when they exist physically. Actors react more naturally to real stimuli, and cameras capture subtle details that remain difficult to simulate perfectly. However, practical effects alone could never deliver the scale required by the story. The film therefore depended heavily upon computer-generated imagery. CGI allows filmmakers to alter environments, extend locations, remove modern elements, create destruction, and combine numerous visual layers into seamless images. The audience experiences a believable catastrophe precisely because digital artists carefully manipulate reality. Visual effects pipelines resemble manufacturing systems. Raw footage enters the pipeline and moves through multiple specialized departments. Match-moving artists recreate camera movements digitally. Modelers build three-dimensional assets. Texture artists apply surfaces and materials. Animators create movement. Compositors integrate every element into a final image. Hundreds of individuals may contribute to only a few seconds of finished footage. Editing technology is equally important. Action movies succeed or fail according to rhythm. Editors must control the flow of information with extraordinary precision. Reveal too much, and suspense disappears. Reveal too little, and confusion increases. The editing process therefore resembles musical composition. Every cut influences emotional intensity. Professional editing systems such as Avid Media Composer have become industry standards precisely because they allow filmmakers to organize enormous amounts of footage efficiently. Modern productions generate extraordinary quantities of data. Multiple cameras, numerous takes, and extensive visual effects work can create hundreds of hours of material. Without sophisticated digital workflows, managing this information would become nearly impossible. Color grading introduces another powerful technological dimension. Raw digital footage often appears flat and neutral. Colorists then shape the visual identity of the film using advanced software systems, such as DaVinci Resolve. Color temperature, contrast, saturation, and shadow detail can all be manipulated with extraordinary precision. London Has Fallen frequently uses cooler tones and subdued color palettes during moments of uncertainty and danger. Blues and grays dominate many sequences, creating feelings of tension and instability. Human psychology responds strongly to color. Cool environments often feel more threatening and emotionally distant than warm environments. Technology therefore becomes an instrument for emotional guidance. Data management itself represents another invisible achievement. Modern productions generate enormous amounts of information every day. Footage must be backed up, organized, labeled, transferred, and protected. Losing critical data could cost millions of dollars. Consequently, filmmaking increasingly resembles information technology management as much as traditional photography. Sound technology also influenced production decisions even before post-production began. Dialogue, environmental noise, and practical effects often require careful recording strategies. Action sequences are notoriously difficult because explosions, vehicles, and crowds create unpredictable audio environments. Multiple microphones and redundant recording systems help preserve usable material. One of the most remarkable aspects of modern filmmaking is how seamlessly hardware and software cooperate. Cameras, lenses, editing platforms, rendering systems, and visual effects tools all function as interconnected technologies. Each department depends upon the reliability of the others. The entire production behaves like an integrated technological ecosystem. Perhaps the most fascinating lesson from London Has Fallen is that audiences rarely think about these technologies while watching the movie. They experience fear, suspense, relief, and excitement rather than sensors, rendering pipelines, codecs, and digital compositing. Yet that emotional response is precisely the purpose of technology. The greatest engineering achievements often become invisible because they perform their functions so effectively. In the end, London Has Fallen demonstrates that modern action cinema is not simply storytelling. It is applied engineering. Cameras transform light into data. Software transforms data into images. Editors transform images into emotion. Visual effects artists transform imagination into apparent reality. Through this extraordinary collaboration between hardware, software, and human creativity, millions of dollars of technology ultimately become something deeply human. The feeling that one exhausted man is carrying the weight of the world while running through a city that seems to be falling apart around him. When audiences watch an action film, they usually focus on the hero. They see Mike Banning running through collapsing streets, exchanging gunfire, and making impossible decisions under pressure. What remains invisible is the enormous organizational machine required to create those few minutes of excitement. London Has Fallen was not merely a movie production. It functioned like a temporary multinational corporation employing hundreds of specialists across numerous departments, all operating under strict deadlines and significant financial pressure. Production management in filmmaking begins with a simple but intimidating reality. Time equals money. Every additional shooting day increases expenses. Equipment rentals continue accumulating costs. Actors remain on payroll. Hotels, transportation, catering, and insurance expenses keep growing. Consequently, filmmakers constantly ask a difficult question: how can they maximize creative quality while minimizing wasted time? London Has Fallen frequently uses cooler tones and subdued color palettes during moments of uncertainty and danger. Blues and grays dominate many sequences, creating feelings of tension and instability. Human psychology responds strongly to color. Cool environments often feel more threatening and emotionally distant than warm environments. Technology, therefore, becomes an instrument for emotional guidance. Data management itself represents another invisible achievement. Modern productions generate enormous amounts of information every day. Footage must be backed up, organized, labeled, transferred, and protected. Losing critical data could cost millions of dollars. Consequently, filmmaking increasingly resembles information technology management as much as traditional photography. Sound technology also influenced production decisions even before post-production began. Dialogue, environmental noise, and practical effects often require careful recording strategies. Action sequences are notoriously difficult because explosions, vehicles, and crowds create unpredictable audio environments. Multiple microphones and redundant recording systems help preserve usable material. One of the most remarkable aspects of modern filmmaking is how seamlessly hardware and software cooperate. Cameras, lenses, editing platforms, rendering systems, and visual effects tools all function as interconnected technologies. Each department depends upon the reliability of the others. The entire production behaves like an integrated technological ecosystem. Perhaps the most fascinating lesson from London Has Fallen is that audiences rarely think about these technologies while watching the movie. They experience fear, suspense, relief, and excitement rather than sensors, rendering pipelines, codecs, and digital compositing. Yet that emotional response is precisely the purpose of technology. The greatest engineering achievements often become invisible because they perform their functions so effectively. In the end, London Has Fallen demonstrates that modern action cinema is not simply storytelling. It is applied engineering. Cameras transform light into data. Software transforms data into images. Editors transform images into emotion. Visual effects artists transform imagination into apparent reality. Through this extraordinary collaboration between hardware, software, and human creativity, millions of dollars of technology ultimately become something deeply human. The feeling that one exhausted man is carrying the weight of the world while running through a city that seems to be falling apart around him. When audiences watch an action film, they usually focus on the hero. They see Mike Banning running through collapsing streets, exchanging gunfire, and making impossible decisions under pressure. What remains invisible is the enormous organizational machine required to create those few minutes of excitement. London Has Fallen was not merely a movie production. It functioned like a temporary multinational corporation employing hundreds of specialists across numerous departments, all operating under strict deadlines and significant financial pressure. Production management in filmmaking begins with a simple but intimidating reality. Time equals money. Every additional shooting day increases expenses. Equipment rentals continue accumulating costs. Actors remain on payroll. Hotels, transportation, catering, and insurance expenses keep growing. Consequently, filmmakers constantly ask a difficult question: how can they maximize creative quality while minimizing wasted time? This challenge resembles corporate project management. Large companies launching products face similar pressures. Engineers, designers, marketers, and logistics teams must coordinate activities according to precise schedules. If one department falls behind, the entire project suffers. Film productions operate according to exactly the same principles. Before cameras begin recording, producers create highly detailed production schedules. Every location, actor availability, equipment requirement, and transportation arrangement must be carefully planned. Action films are particularly demanding because stunt work, practical effects, and visual effects sequences often require extraordinary preparation. A poorly organized day can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. London has fallen presented an especially complicated management challenge because its story demanded international scale. The movie portrays political leaders from around the world, coordinated terrorist attacks, military responses, and large-scale urban destruction. Even though much of the destruction was created through digital effects, the production still required substantial logistical coordination. Scheduling itself becomes an exercise in optimization. Consider a simple scene involving several actors and a complex location. If one actor is unavailable, cameras cannot roll. If equipment arrives late, crews remain idle. If weather conditions become unsuitable, expensive delays occur. Production managers therefore function like operations executives whose primary objective is minimizing inefficiency. The assistant director plays an especially important role in this process. While directors concentrate on creative decisions, assistant directors frequently oversee scheduling, communication, and execution. They ensure departments remain synchronized and problems are addressed quickly. In many respects, assistant directors resemble chief operating officers inside corporations. Workforce allocation is equally fascinating. Modern film productions divide labor into highly specialized departments. Camera teams focus on cinematography. Lighting crews manage illumination. Makeup artists prepare performers. Stunt coordinators supervise dangerous sequences. Visual effects supervisors monitor footage requirements for post-production. Transportation departments move personnel and equipment. Security teams protect locations and manage crowds. This specialization significantly increases efficiency. Economists have long recognized that dividing complex tasks among specialists improves productivity. Modern filmmaking demonstrates this principle beautifully. No individual possesses every skill necessary to make a movie. Instead, expertise is distributed across hundreds of professionals whose combined efforts create experiences impossible for any single person to achieve alone. Action sequences intensify management complexity even further. Consider a scene involving explosions, vehicles, and dozens of performers. Safety meetings must occur. Emergency procedures must be established. Insurance requirements must be satisfied. Camera placements must be coordinated with stunt choreography. Communication systems must function flawlessly. Every participant needs clear instructions because confusion increases both risk and expense. Leadership hierarchy therefore becomes essential. Film productions operate through carefully defined chains of command. Department heads supervise their respective teams while communicating with producers and directors. Information flows through structured channels because efficient organizations depend upon clarity. Without hierarchy, decision-making slows and operational effectiveness deteriorates. The movie itself mirrors many of these organizational realities. The story portrays governments, security agencies, intelligence services, and emergency responders attempting to function during unprecedented circumstances. Communication becomes fragmented. Systems become overloaded. Leaders must make rapid decisions using incomplete information. In many ways, the narrative demonstrates what happens when organizational structures encounter extraordinary stress. One particularly interesting aspect of studio economics involves risk management. Film studios rarely invest purely for artistic satisfaction. They allocate capital expecting returns. Consequently, management decisions continuously balance creativity against financial responsibility. Should an additional location be used? Is another week of filming justified? Can a sequence be achieved more efficiently? These questions resemble corporate capital allocation decisions. Every dollar spent on production represents resources that cannot be spent elsewhere. Producers therefore become strategic managers responsible for maximizing both artistic impact and financial performance. Sequels also provide significant economic advantages from a management perspective. Existing franchises already possess recognizable brands and established audiences. Operational knowledge from previous productions can be reused. Relationships with key creative personnel already exist. Certain risks become easier to predict because previous experience generates valuable information. London Has Fallen benefited considerably from these advantages. The previous film had already introduced Mike Banning, President Asher, and the franchise's general tone. Management teams therefore possessed better understanding of audience expectations and operational requirements. Familiarity reduces uncertainty, and uncertainty is often one of the most expensive challenges in business. Another invisible aspect of production management involves morale. Film productions can be physically exhausting and emotionally demanding. Long hours, difficult locations, and constant pressure create fatigue. Effective leaders, therefore, pay attention not only to schedules and budgets, but also to human motivation. Teams generally perform better when they feel respected, informed, and valued. The film's central theme of perseverance indirectly reflects this reality. Mike Banning continues functioning despite exhaustion because his mission possesses meaning. Organizations similarly perform best when individuals understand why their work matters. Purpose often becomes a powerful source of resilience. Studio economics ultimately revolves around transformation. Capital enters the system and gradually becomes labor, technology, locations, equipment, and eventually finished entertainment. Every shooting day represents money being converted into emotional experiences that audiences will later consume. Success depends not merely on artistic talent, but on disciplined management. Perhaps the most remarkable lesson from London Has Fallen is that spectacular action emerges from remarkable organization. Behind every explosion lies scheduling. Behind every chase sequence lies transportation planning. Behind every emotional moment lies coordination among hundreds of professionals. Cinema often appears spontaneous, yet it is actually one of the world's most complex examples of project management. In filmmaking, as in business, imagination may inspire the journey, but disciplined execution determines whether the destination is ever reached. Action movies often promise spectacle rather than education. Buildings explode, governments collapse, and heroes survive circumstances that appear impossible. Yet one of the most interesting questions we can ask is simple. Could any of this actually happen? London Has Fallen invites viewers into a terrifying scenario involving the assassination of world leaders during a state funeral. While the movie exaggerates certain events for dramatic effect, many of its underlying ideas are rooted in genuine historical and security concerns. The central premise immediately possesses a degree of realism. Large gatherings of world leaders are indeed considered high-risk events. State funerals, international summits, and diplomatic meetings concentrate enormous political significance into one location. Security agencies around the world spend months preparing for such occasions because they recognize an uncomfortable truth. High-value targets naturally attract high-value threats. History repeatedly demonstrates this principle. Political assassinations have altered entire nations. Terrorist organizations have targeted symbolic locations and influential individuals because such attacks produce psychological effects far beyond the immediate physical damage. The movie therefore begins with a scenario that, while highly dramatized, emerges from legitimate security concerns. However, realism begins to decrease when considering the scale of the coordinated attacks. London is among the most heavily monitored cities in the world. Thousands of surveillance cameras operate throughout the city. Intelligence services, police agencies, transportation authorities, and emergency responders possess extensive coordination capabilities. Organizing simultaneous attacks of this magnitude without detection would be extraordinarily difficult. This does not mean complex attacks are impossible. History contains examples of highly coordinated operations involving careful planning and substantial resources. Yet the movie compresses numerous successful attacks into a remarkably short period. In reality, maintaining operational secrecy across so many participants would become increasingly challenging. Human organizations naturally generate mistakes, communication failures, and opportunities for detection. The film also portrays terrorists infiltrating security systems with astonishing effectiveness. Intelligence failures certainly occur. No security arrangement is perfect. Nevertheless, gatherings involving world leaders are usually protected through multiple layers of redundancy. Agencies continuously examine routes, personnel, communication systems, and potential vulnerabilities. Security planning often assumes that adversaries will actively search for weaknesses. One of the movie's strongest realistic elements is its depiction of confusion during emergencies. Large crises frequently create informational chaos. Reports conflict. Communications become fragmented. Individuals struggle to understand events as they unfold. Decision-makers rarely possess complete information. Instead, they must act while simultaneously gathering data. This aspect of the film feels psychologically and operationally authentic. Emergency management research consistently demonstrates that crises generate uncertainty and cognitive overload. Human beings prefer orderly information and predictable environments. Catastrophic events remove both. The confusion portrayed throughout London therefore resembles many real-world emergencies in which responders initially struggle to establish situational awareness. The film's portrayal of executive protection also contains elements of realism. Protective agents train extensively to evacuate principals rapidly and adapt to changing conditions. Their responsibility is not to eliminate every threat, but to maximize survival probabilities. Quick decision-making, route changes, contingency planning, and continuous vigilance are all genuine aspects of protective operations. Mike Banning himself, however, operates within the tradition of cinematic exaggeration. Real protective agents possess extraordinary training and discipline, but they remain human beings subject to physical limitations. The sheer amount of punishment Banning absorbs while maintaining operational effectiveness stretches realism considerably. Human physiology imposes constraints that action cinema often ignores. Fatigue impairs reaction time. Injuries reduce performance. Stress affects decision-making and physical coordination. Real protective operations rely heavily on teamwork precisely because individual endurance has limits. Movies frequently compress the contributions of entire organizations into one exceptional protagonist because doing so produces clearer emotional storytelling. The movie's use of drones, encrypted communications, surveillance technologies, and intelligence coordination reflects another interesting blend of fact and fiction. Modern security operations genuinely depend upon sophisticated technologies. Information systems, digital mapping, satellite communications, and data-sharing platforms have transformed protective strategies. Yet technology also introduces vulnerabilities. Interconnected systems can create new opportunities for disruption. Cybersecurity experts frequently discuss how complexity itself may become a source of risk. The movie indirectly touches upon this idea by portraying highly advanced security arrangements that nevertheless fail dramatically under coordinated pressure. Scientifically speaking, the explosions and structural destruction shown in the film often prioritize visual impact over engineering accuracy. Buildings are remarkably complex structures designed to withstand significant forces. The cinematic destruction of famous landmarks generally occurs more rapidly and dramatically than structural engineers would expect under many real circumstances. Action cinema frequently exaggerates explosive effects because audiences intuitively understand visual destruction. Real structural failures can be slower, less visually spectacular, and highly dependent upon specific construction methods. The film therefore sacrifices engineering precision in favor of emotional immediacy. Another realistic dimension involves psychology. Terrorist organizations often seek symbolic targets rather than purely military objectives. Symbols possess enormous communicative power. Famous cities, recognizable landmarks, and prominent leaders attract attention precisely because they carry psychological significance. Violence directed at symbols can generate fear disproportionate to the actual scale of physical destruction. The movie also accurately portrays an important principle of modern security thinking. Complete safety is impossible. Security professionals generally focus on risk reduction rather than absolute prevention. Resources are finite. Information remains incomplete. Threats continuously evolve. Consequently, protective systems aim to improve probabilities rather than guarantee outcomes. This idea may be one of the film's most educational lessons. Modern societies often depend upon complex networks of trust and invisible protection. Transportation systems function because people assume safety measures exist. Diplomatic events occur because participants believe risks are manageable. Most days these systems perform effectively, and their success becomes almost invisible. London Has Fallen transforms these invisible systems into dramatic entertainment by imagining what happens when several layers of protection fail simultaneously. The movie exaggerates scale and compresses probability, but its underlying themes remain surprisingly relevant. Complexity creates vulnerability. Information becomes precious during crises. Symbolic targets attract symbolic violence. Leadership becomes extraordinarily difficult under uncertainty. Ultimately, the film operates somewhere between realism and fantasy. Its events are highly improbable in their exact form, yet many of the fears, logistical concerns, and psychological principles beneath them are entirely real. The movie's greatest educational value lies not in teaching viewers how governments operate minute by minute, but in reminding us that modern civilization depends upon fragile systems of planning, coordination, trust, and preparation that often remain invisible until they are suddenly tested. Action movies frequently communicate emotion through dialogue and performance, but London Has Fallen relies heavily on another language entirely. Light, color, framing, and camera movement constantly tell the audience how to feel. Before a character even speaks, the cinematography has already begun guiding our emotions. The film understands a fundamental truth of visual storytelling. People often feel images before they consciously interpret them. Cinematography can be described as visual engineering. Every frame represents a series of technical decisions involving lenses, lighting, camera positions, sensor capabilities, and composition principles. These decisions are not merely artistic preferences. They directly influence human psychology. Slight adjustments in framing or color can make viewers feel safe, anxious, isolated, or hopeful. The movie begins with relatively controlled and elegant imagery. The state funeral scenes use orderly compositions and balanced framing. Buildings appear majestic. Processions move with dignity. The camera often maintains stable movements and respectful distances. This visual order creates emotional security. The audience perceives civilization functioning normally. Then the attacks begin, and the cinematography changes dramatically. Camera movements become more urgent. Frames become tighter and more unstable. Smoke obscures visual information. Crowded environments feel confusing and dangerous. This transformation is psychologically effective because humans instinctively associate visual instability with environmental uncertainty. The cinematography itself begins behaving like the crisis. Lens selection plays a major role in creating this effect. Wide lenses are frequently used during large-scale destruction sequences. Wide lenses exaggerate space and make environments feel enormous. Buildings appear taller. Streets feel longer. Explosions seem more expansive. This visual strategy increases the perceived scale of the disaster. During moments of personal danger, however, the movie frequently shifts toward tighter framing. Longer lenses compress distance and make threats feel closer. A person standing several meters away can appear uncomfortably near. This compression generates tension because it reduces the psychological feeling of available space. Composition geometry is another fascinating aspect of the film's visual design. Human beings naturally seek order and symmetry. Throughout the funeral sequences, compositions often feel balanced and controlled. As the attacks progress, the visual geometry becomes increasingly fragmented. Frames become asymmetrical. Characters appear trapped against walls or surrounded by debris. The compositions themselves begin communicating disorder. This principle is deeply rooted in psychology. Symmetry often produces feelings of stability and beauty. Asymmetry creates tension and uncertainty. The film continuously manipulates these responses to guide emotional experience without requiring verbal explanation. Lighting design contributes equally to this process. Early scenes contain softer, more natural illumination. The city feels alive and ceremonial. As danger escalates, lighting conditions become harsher and less predictable. Smoke, fire, and shadows dominate many environments. Human beings possess ancient psychological associations with darkness and obscured vision. Uncertainty often increases when visual information becomes incomplete. Fire itself becomes an important visual element throughout the movie. Flames provide dynamic lighting that constantly changes shape and intensity. This instability contributes to the feeling that the world is becoming increasingly unpredictable. Fire also carries symbolic meaning. It simultaneously represents destruction, urgency, and transformation. Color science plays an equally significant role. The movie frequently relies upon cool tones, including grays, muted blues, and desaturated environments. These colors create emotional distance and seriousness. Warm colors generally feel inviting and comforting. Cooler palettes often feel more clinical and threatening. By emphasizing cooler tones, the cinematography reinforces themes of danger and uncertainty. Digital sensors and modern cameras contribute significantly to this visual approach. Contemporary cinema cameras possess remarkable dynamic range, allowing filmmakers to preserve detail in both bright highlights and dark shadows simultaneously. Action films particularly benefit from this capability because explosions and smoke frequently create extreme lighting conditions. Dynamic range can be understood through a simple analogy. Human eyes comfortably observe both bright skies and dark interiors. Cameras historically struggled to reproduce this flexibility. Modern sensors dramatically improve this capability, enabling cinematographers to create images that feel more immersive and realistic. Depth of field also influences emotional perception. Certain moments isolate characters sharply, while surrounding environments become blurred. This selective focus guides attention toward important emotional information. The audience naturally looks where the cinematographer wants them to look. Visual storytelling, therefore, becomes a process of controlled perception. The movie frequently frames Mike Banning as a relatively small figure moving through overwhelming environments. This visual choice reinforces one of the film's central themes. The hero is only one individual confronting enormous forces. Large buildings, burning streets, and chaotic crowds constantly remind viewers of the scale of the challenge. Interestingly, despite all the destruction, the film avoids making London completely unrecognizable. Famous landmarks remain visually identifiable. This decision is crucial because emotional reactions often depend upon recognition. Destruction carries greater impact when audiences understand exactly what is being threatened. Camera height also subtly affects emotional interpretation. Lower angles frequently make characters appear stronger and more authoritative. Higher angles can create vulnerability and helplessness. The film alternates between these perspectives depending on narrative requirements. Sometimes Banning appears dominant and capable. At other moments, he appears isolated and overwhelmed. One remarkable feature of cinematography is that audiences rarely consciously notice it. Viewers generally remember excitement, fear, or suspense rather than lens focal lengths and composition strategies. Yet these emotions often emerge precisely because visual engineering has been carefully orchestrated. Every frame has been designed to produce specific psychological responses. Ultimately, London Has Fallen demonstrates that cinematography is far more than attractive imagery. It is the science of transforming light into emotion. Sensors convert photons into digital information. Lenses manipulate spatial perception. Colors influence mood. Composition shapes psychological meaning. Through this extraordinary visual engineering, the film transforms a city under attack into an emotional experience that feels immediate, chaotic, and deeply human, reminding us that cinema frequently speaks most powerfully through images rather than words. Human beings evolved to react quickly to sound. Long before written language existed, a sudden noise in the darkness could mean danger or survival. Filmmakers understand this instinct extremely well. While audiences often praise explosions and action scenes, much of their emotional experience is actually created through sound. London Has Fallen uses sound not merely as background decoration but as a sophisticated psychological system designed to guide fear, tension, and relief. Sound design can be described as invisible architecture. Viewers see images directly, but they feel sound almost subconsciously. A single low-frequency rumble can create unease. Distant sirens can imply approaching danger. Silence itself can become terrifying. Sound therefore functions like emotional engineering, shaping perception without constantly demanding attention. The film begins with an atmosphere of ceremony and dignity. Church bells, respectful conversations, footsteps, and ambient city sounds establish normality. These opening sounds are carefully controlled and balanced. They communicate order and civilization. The audience feels safe because the soundscape feels predictable. Then the attacks begin, and the entire sonic environment transforms. Explosions suddenly dominate the sound field. Gunfire erupts from unexpected directions. Vehicles collide. People scream. Emergency sirens overlap one another. The soundtrack intentionally becomes crowded and overwhelming because real emergencies often produce sensory overload. The audience is not simply watching chaos. They are hearing chaos. This technique is psychologically effective because the human brain constantly searches for patterns and predictability. When sound becomes fragmented and unpredictable, stress naturally increases. Numerous studies in psychology have shown that uncertainty often generates greater anxiety than known dangers. The movie repeatedly uses unpredictable sound events to keep viewers emotionally engaged. Dynamic range management is one of the film's most important technical achievements. Dynamic range in sound refers to the difference between quiet and loud moments. Effective action movies avoid remaining constantly loud because endless intensity eventually produces emotional fatigue. Instead, they alternate between quieter moments and sudden bursts of sound. London Has Fallen frequently uses this principle. Moments of relative silence create temporary emotional recovery. Then explosions or gunfire abruptly interrupt that calm. The sudden contrast feels powerful precisely because the audience's sensory expectations have been temporarily relaxed. In many ways, this resembles financial investment strategies. Constant stimulation produces diminishing returns. Carefully timed escalation creates greater value. Sound designers therefore behave almost like economists allocating emotional resources. They determine when intensity should increase, when it should decrease, and how these changes influence audience experience. Spatial audio also plays an important role. Human beings instinctively attempt to locate sounds within their environments. Modern cinema sound systems take advantage of this tendency by placing audio elements around the audience. Helicopters may appear to move overhead. Gunfire may seem to originate from different directions. Explosions may feel physically present. This spatial dimension significantly increases immersion. The audience's senses become more deeply involved in the experience because sound behaves as it would in reality. The movie effectively transforms passive viewing into something resembling environmental participation. Dialogue management is equally impressive. Action films often struggle because explosions and music can overwhelm spoken information. Yet audiences must still understand critical conversations. Sound mixers therefore carefully balance competing audio elements. Mixing itself resembles engineering optimization. Dialogue, music, environmental effects, and explosions all compete for limited sonic space. If one element becomes too dominant, another may lose clarity. Professional mixing therefore requires extraordinary precision. Every sound must possess an appropriate position and intensity. The movie's gunfire deserves particular attention. Real weapons produce sounds that are often startlingly loud and sharp. Cinema sometimes modifies these sounds to maximize dramatic impact. London Has Fallen uses weapon effects that feel powerful and immediate while remaining intelligible within the overall mix. Every gunshot communicates urgency and danger. Sirens also become recurring sonic symbols throughout the movie. Emergency sirens carry enormous psychological significance because they are culturally associated with crises and loss of control. Even when viewers cannot see danger directly, hearing sirens immediately creates anticipation and concern. Silence, surprisingly, becomes one of the film's most effective tools. Before certain confrontations, sound levels occasionally decrease. Music softens. Environmental effects become less prominent. These quieter moments focus attention and increase tension. Silence is powerful because it invites anticipation. The audience senses that something important is about to happen. Music contributes another essential layer of emotional architecture. Action scores often combine percussion, orchestral elements, electronic textures, and repetitive motifs to generate momentum. The score in London Has Fallen generally emphasizes urgency and seriousness rather than triumph or celebration. It reinforces the feeling that circumstances remain dangerous and unstable. Musical themes also provide continuity. Repeated motifs subtly remind audiences of emotional ideas and character relationships. Music can therefore function almost like memory. Certain sounds become associated with danger, hope, or resilience. Over time, these associations strengthen emotional engagement. The production pipeline required to achieve this sonic experience is remarkably sophisticated. Dialogue is cleaned and edited. Additional sound effects are recorded and layered. Foley artists recreate footsteps, clothing movement, and object interactions. Composers create original music. Sound designers assemble environmental textures. Re-recording mixers combine every element into a coherent whole. Hundreds of individual audio components may exist within only a few minutes of finished film. Sound production therefore resembles assembling a vast invisible orchestra. Every participant contributes small pieces that collectively become a unified emotional experience. Perhaps the most fascinating aspect of sound design is its invisibility. Audiences usually remember excitement, fear, and suspense rather than specific audio techniques. Yet those emotions frequently exist because sound has been carefully engineered to guide attention and influence perception. Ultimately, London Has Fallen demonstrates that sound is an investment in immersion. Explosions provide impact. Silence creates anticipation. Music generates emotional continuity. Spatial effects create presence. Dialogue communicates meaning. Through sophisticated mixing architecture and carefully managed dynamic range, the film transforms waves of air pressure into something profoundly human, the feeling that danger is surrounding us from every direction and that one determined individual is struggling to keep order alive in the middle of overwhelming chaos. Most moviegoers experience marketing only as trailers appearing before videos, posters in theaters, or advertisements on social media. Yet behind every successful film lies an enormous analytical operation. London Has Fallen was not simply produced and released into the world with the hope that audiences would discover it naturally. The film was introduced through carefully designed marketing strategies intended to maximize awareness, excitement, and ultimately revenue. Marketing in modern cinema resembles launching a major technology product. Companies releasing smartphones or software platforms spend months building anticipation before consumers can purchase the product. Films operate according to remarkably similar principles. Awareness must be generated. Expectations must be shaped. Curiosity must be sustained. The objective is simple: convince millions of people that watching the movie is worth their time and money. The marketing challenge for London Has Fallen was particularly interesting because it was a sequel. Sequels enjoy an important advantage. Audiences already possess familiarity with the brand. The previous film, Olympus Has Fallen, had introduced Mike Banning and established the franchise's tone. Consequently, Marketers did not need to explain who the hero was or what kind of experience viewers should expect. Existing brand recognition significantly reduces customer acquisition costs. Businesses appreciate repeat customers because attracting new consumers is expensive and uncertain. Film franchises operate similarly. Previous viewers represent a pre-existing audience base that already understands the product and may be willing to return for another experience. However, familiarity also creates a challenge. Sequels must appear recognizable while simultaneously offering something new. Marketing therefore emphasized a simple but powerful idea. The threat had expanded. Instead of the White House being attacked, one of the world's most famous cities was under assault. The stakes had become international. This message was immediately understandable. Good marketing often depends upon clarity rather than complexity. A single sentence capable of generating curiosity is usually more effective than complicated explanations. Audiences instantly grasp the premise. World leaders trapped in London during coordinated attacks creates immediate tension and intrigue. Trailers became the primary instrument for communicating this idea. Film trailers are fascinating examples of compressed storytelling. Within only a few minutes, marketers must establish characters, communicate tone, reveal enough spectacle to generate excitement, and avoid revealing excessive plot information. Trailer editors therefore behave almost like data scientists. They constantly ask difficult questions. Which scenes create maximum curiosity? Which moments should remain hidden? Which pieces of dialogue communicate urgency? Every second of trailer footage functions as a carefully selected data point designed to influence consumer behavior. Action films benefit particularly well from trailer marketing because visual excitement translates effectively across cultures. Explosions, suspense, helicopters, collapsing buildings, and heroic determination require relatively little explanation. Spectacle becomes a universal language. Consequently, marketing campaigns for action movies frequently perform strongly in international markets. Demographic targeting also played a major role. Marketing teams continuously analyze audience characteristics. Who watched the previous film? Which age groups engage most actively with action thrillers? Which regions respond strongly to stories involving geopolitical crises and heroic rescue missions? This process resembles customer segmentation in business analytics. Companies divide consumers into categories based on preferences and behaviors. Film marketers do the same. Different promotional materials may emphasize different aspects of the movie depending upon the intended audience. Some viewers are attracted primarily by Gerard Butler's presence as an action star. Others respond to political suspense. Some enjoy large-scale destruction and spectacle. Effective campaigns recognize these differences and tailor messages accordingly. Digital marketing has dramatically transformed these strategies. Earlier generations depended heavily on television advertisements and printed posters. Modern campaigns increasingly rely on social media platforms, online video distribution, search optimization, and targeted advertising algorithms. Every click, view, and interaction generates valuable information. Marketing teams can monitor engagement levels almost in real time. Which trailer versions generate more views? Which posters receive stronger reactions? Which platforms produce higher conversion rates? Audience behavior increasingly becomes measurable data. This analytical approach resembles A/B testing in technology companies. Digital platforms frequently present multiple versions of advertisements and observe consumer responses. Film marketing increasingly uses similar techniques. Different images, taglines, and promotional videos may be tested to determine which materials generate greater engagement. Cost per thousand impressions, commonly called CPM, becomes an important concept here. Marketers must continuously evaluate whether advertising expenditures are producing sufficient awareness and ticket sales. Every promotional decision represents resource allocation under uncertainty. Social amplification also contributed significantly to the campaign. Action movies often generate discussions through reaction videos, entertainment websites, interviews, and online communities. Public conversation itself becomes a form of marketing. Human beings naturally pay attention to topics receiving widespread discussion. The movie's central concept also possessed strong emotional marketability. Fear, danger, and heroism are powerful psychological triggers. Audiences often seek controlled experiences involving tension and relief. Marketing campaigns therefore highlighted peril while simultaneously implying resilience and action. They sold not merely a film but an emotional experience. Post-release analytics become equally important. Studios monitor opening weekend performance, audience demographics, international revenues, and regional responses. This information influences future decision-making. Which territories generated stronger returns? Which marketing approaches performed effectively? What lessons can improve future franchise installments? From a business perspective, every film release functions as both a commercial event and a learning opportunity. Revenue matters, but information also possesses tremendous value. Data collected during one release often shapes future investments and strategic decisions. Perhaps the most fascinating lesson from London Has Fallen is that audiences rarely encounter movies accidentally. The path from production to theater is carefully designed and continuously analyzed. Trailers are tested. Demographics are studied. Promotional materials are optimized. Campaigns are adjusted according to audience behavior. In the end, marketing transforms cinema from artistic creation into public experience. Without marketing, even extraordinary films may remain unseen. Through audience analytics, targeted campaigns, digital engagement strategies, and carefully engineered anticipation, London Has Fallen was positioned not merely as another action movie, but as a global event promising suspense, spectacle, and heroic survival. The explosions may have occurred on screen, but the battle for audience attention began months earlier inside conference rooms filled with data, projections, and strategic planning. The life of a movie does not end when its credits roll. In many ways, that is when an entirely different journey begins. Once audiences leave theaters, a film enters the world of criticism, awards discussions, streaming libraries, cultural memory, and long-term financial valuation. London Has Fallen therefore deserves to be examined not only as an action thriller, but also as a commercial and cultural product whose reputation continues evolving long after its initial release. Critical reception is one of cinema's most fascinating paradoxes. Financial success and critical approval do not always move together. Some highly praised films struggle commercially, while some financially successful films receive mixed reviews from critics. This divergence occurs because critics and general audiences often evaluate movies according to different priorities. Critics frequently examine originality, thematic depth, artistic ambition, and technical execution. General audiences often place greater emphasis on emotional satisfaction, entertainment value, pacing, and whether a film delivers the experience it promised. Neither perspective is inherently superior. They simply reflect different methods of evaluating value. London Has Fallen received generally mixed reviews from professional critics. Some reviewers argued that the story relied heavily on familiar action formulas and exaggerated scenarios. Others questioned aspects of realism and narrative complexity. Yet many reviewers also acknowledged the movie's relentless pacing, effective suspense, and Gerard Butler's committed performance. Audience responses often proved more favorable than critical reactions. This difference is extremely interesting from a business perspective because it demonstrates an important principle. Consumers frequently reward products that reliably deliver desired experiences, even when those products are not regarded as groundbreaking innovations. Consider restaurants as an analogy. A meal does not need to reinvent cuisine to become successful. It simply needs to satisfy customers consistently. London Has Fallen operates similarly. It never attempts to become an experimental art film. Instead, it focuses on delivering suspense, action, and heroic perseverance with confidence and efficiency. Financially, this distinction matters enormously. Investors care deeply about audience behavior because ticket purchases, streaming subscriptions, and licensing agreements depend upon consumer satisfaction rather than awards alone. The film's worldwide gross of approximately $205.8 million strongly suggested that substantial audiences valued the experience being offered. Awards recognition represents another interesting dimension of critical reception. Films receive various forms of recognition for acting, visual effects, sound design, editing, music, and technical achievements. Prestigious awards can significantly influence public perception by increasing visibility and extending commercial life. London Has Fallen was not positioned as a major awards contender in categories traditionally associated with prestige cinema. It lacked the historical gravitas of biographical dramas and the artistic experimentation often favored during awards seasons. Yet this absence of awards attention does not automatically diminish its significance. Awards and popularity frequently represent different forms of success. Some films function primarily as artistic achievements. Others become cultural entertainments that audiences revisit repeatedly because they provide reliable enjoyment. Action cinema has historically excelled in this second category. Brand perception, therefore, becomes critically important. The movie reinforced the identity of the Fallen franchise as a dependable source of grounded action thrillers centered around competence, loyalty, and large-scale threats. Strong brands create expectations, and meeting those expectations generates trust. Trust itself possesses measurable economic value. Consumers who enjoy one installment of a franchise become more likely to engage with future entries. This relationship lowers uncertainty and creates opportunities for long-term revenue generation. In business language, brand equity compounds over time. Streaming platforms have dramatically changed the concept of legacy. Earlier generations relied heavily upon theatrical performance and physical media sales. Today, films can continue attracting audiences years after release through digital libraries. Streaming availability extends commercial lifespan and introduces movies to entirely new viewers. Action films frequently perform exceptionally well in streaming environments because they possess high replay value and relatively universal appeal. Viewers can enter the experience quickly, understand the premise immediately, and enjoy the emotional momentum without extensive contextual knowledge. Library value, therefore, becomes an increasingly important economic concept. Every film becomes an asset capable of generating revenue repeatedly across multiple platforms and formats. Successful movies gradually transform into intellectual properties that continue producing value long after theatrical runs conclude. International performance contributes significantly to legacy as well. London Has Fallen demonstrated strong worldwide appeal because action and suspense communicate effectively across linguistic and cultural boundaries. Explosions, courage, danger, and perseverance require relatively little translation. This international accessibility increases lifetime valuation considerably. A film capable of attracting viewers across diverse markets possesses greater licensing potential and broader commercial resilience. The movie's emphasis on globally recognizable locations and universally understandable stakes contributed meaningfully to this appeal. Cultural legacy is more difficult to measure, but equally important. Certain movies become reference points within their genres. They influence audience expectations and contribute ideas that later productions adopt and reinterpret. London Has Fallen reinforced the continuing popularity of competent heroes operating under extraordinary pressure. Mike Banning himself gradually evolved into a recognizable action figure within modern cinema. He represents a particular kind of hero archetype, highly capable, emotionally grounded, and relentlessly resilient. Such characters endure because they satisfy deep psychological preferences. Audiences often find comfort in stories where competence and determination continue functioning even when systems collapse. Legacy can therefore be viewed as accumulated relevance. A film survives because it remains useful, enjoyable, or meaningful to future audiences. Some movies endure because they possess profound artistic insights. Others survive because they provide compelling entertainment experiences. London Has Fallen belongs primarily to this second tradition. Perhaps the most interesting lesson from its reception is that cinema possesses multiple currencies. Box office revenue represents one form of value. Critical praise represents another. Awards recognition creates another. Streaming longevity, cultural familiarity, and franchise sustainability create additional forms still. Success in cinema is rarely one-dimensional. Ultimately, London Has Fallen may never be remembered as one of the defining artistic masterpieces of its era. Yet it achieved something many films never accomplish. It successfully transformed a relatively modest budget into a profitable global franchise installment, satisfied substantial audiences around the world, strengthened its brand identity, and established lasting value across theatrical and streaming ecosystems. In the language of finance, it became an appreciating entertainment asset. In the language of audiences, it became an enjoyable and highly watchable action thriller. And in the language of cinema history, it demonstrated once again that cultural value can emerge not only from artistic prestige, but also from the simple and remarkably difficult achievement of delivering exactly the experience people hoped to receive. There is something strangely comforting about action movies. They often begin with ordinary routines, move through extraordinary chaos, and end by reminding us that resilience remains possible even when the world appears to be falling apart. London Has Fallen follows this timeless structure with remarkable confidence. Beneath the explosions and gunfire lies a story about trust, responsibility, and the persistent human desire to restore order when circumstances become frighteningly unpredictable. Throughout the film, we repeatedly witness the collision between systems and individuals. Governments possess intelligence agencies, security protocols, and vast resources. Cities possess infrastructure and emergency services. International alliances possess diplomatic and military capabilities. Yet the story constantly asks an uncomfortable question. What happens when even sophisticated systems begin to fail? The answer the movie proposes is surprisingly human. Systems matter enormously, but ultimately they are built and operated by people. Under extraordinary pressure, institutions become reflections of individual decisions. Somebody chooses to continue communicating. Somebody chooses to remain courageous. Somebody chooses responsibility instead of fear. Human behavior becomes the final line of defense. Mike Banning embodies this idea beautifully. He is not portrayed as a genius inventor, a billionaire entrepreneur, or a politician commanding armies. He is a highly trained professional who repeatedly chooses duty over comfort. His strength lies not in perfection but in persistence. He becomes exhausted, injured, and overwhelmed, yet he continues moving forward. This persistence reflects one of the most valuable lessons in psychology. Human beings are often far more resilient than they initially imagine. Resilience does not mean avoiding difficulty. It means functioning despite difficulty. The movie repeatedly demonstrates that courage frequently consists of taking one more step when circumstances suggest surrender would be easier. The relationship between President Asher and Banning reinforces another important idea. Trust possesses extraordinary value. Economists often discuss financial capital and technological capital, yet social trust may be equally important. Organizations depend upon trust. Governments depend upon trust. Families depend upon trust. During moments of uncertainty, confidence in another person's competence can become psychologically invaluable. The film also offers an interesting perspective on leadership. Leaders frequently operate without complete information. They make decisions under pressure, knowing that mistakes carry serious consequences. President Asher's experience throughout the story reminds us that authority does not eliminate vulnerability. Leadership often means remaining functional despite uncertainty and fear. From a technological perspective, the movie illustrates both the power and limitations of modern systems. Surveillance networks, communications technologies, transportation systems, and security infrastructures are immensely sophisticated. Yet complexity itself can create vulnerabilities. The more interconnected systems become, the more important preparation and adaptability become. Technology therefore appears as both protector and challenge. Human civilization increasingly depends upon systems that remain largely invisible during ordinary life. The film transforms these invisible networks into visible drama by imagining their simultaneous failure. In doing so, it quietly encourages appreciation for the countless professionals whose work keeps modern societies functioning every day. Financially, London Has Fallen tells another fascinating story. Approximately $60 million of production investment became more than $200 million in worldwide box office revenue. Fear became entertainment. Suspense became commercial value. Heroism became intellectual property. Cinema repeatedly demonstrates its remarkable ability to transform intangible emotions into measurable economics. This transformation represents one of Hollywood's most fascinating achievements. Artists, engineers, technicians, managers, and investors collaborate to manufacture experiences that exist primarily inside human imagination. Audiences purchase tickets not because they need explosions or fictional crises, but because stories allow people to safely explore fear, courage, and hope. The movie also reminds us why competent heroes remain so appealing. Modern life often feels complex and uncertain. Problems appear enormous, systems appear overwhelming, and information arrives continuously from every direction. Stories like this provide temporary reassurance that determination and expertise still matter. They celebrate capability, preparation, and persistence. Yet perhaps the film's deepest lesson concerns responsibility itself. Mike Banning repeatedly acts because somebody else depends upon him. Responsibility becomes the source of his endurance. Human beings often discover unexpected strength when their actions possess meaning beyond personal comfort. Purpose frequently increases resilience. The City of London also functions symbolically throughout the story. At the beginning, it represents ceremony, history, and international cooperation. During the attacks, it becomes a landscape of fear and uncertainty. By the conclusion, it symbolizes recovery and continuity. Cities, like people, can experience trauma and still endure. This movement from order to chaos and back toward stability mirrors many human experiences. Careers encounter setbacks. Relationships experience difficulties. Societies face crises. The film suggests that recovery rarely occurs because circumstances become easy. Recovery occurs because individuals continue performing difficult tasks despite adversity. In that sense, London Has Fallen is ultimately optimistic. It acknowledges danger without surrendering to despair. It recognizes vulnerability without abandoning hope. It portrays systems failing while simultaneously affirming the value of courage, cooperation, and persistence. The movie therefore exists at a fascinating intersection of art, technology, and capital. Artists created emotional meaning. Engineers built believable destruction and immersive experiences. Investors supplied resources and accepted risk. Audiences completed the equation by investing attention and emotion. Behind every explosion lies engineering. Behind every emotional scene lies psychology. Behind every frame lies financial calculation. Modern cinema continuously demonstrates that creativity rarely exists in isolation. Instead, it emerges from collaboration among disciplines that initially appear unrelated. Ultimately, London Has Fallen succeeds because it understands something timeless about human beings. We fear chaos, yet we admire those who move through chaos with determination. We recognize vulnerability, yet we remain inspired by resilience. We understand that systems matter, yet we instinctively believe individual choices still possess extraordinary significance. The film ends where many meaningful stories end, with survival, renewed appreciation for ordinary life, and recognition that courage is often nothing more than the refusal to stop moving forward. Through action, suspense, technology, economics, and psychology, London Has Fallen reminds us that civilization is sustained not merely by buildings and institutions, but by people willing to accept responsibility when circumstances become difficult. If you found this deep dive meaningful, my literature-loving friends, consider liking and subscribing so we can keep decoding the business and beauty of cinema together.